Welcome to this workshop meeting of the council. Gee, I don't have the usual monitor display, but that's okay.
Are they turned on?
Who knows? It's got lights, so it's probably fine. Do we have any regrets?
No.
No regrets. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? None. Oh, terrific. Well, we have a discussion item, and hopefully Christina Tizard is ready. She's the manager of urban design, and I believe that she has an entertainment, a slideshow for us. It'll be educational. And it looks like it's going to be Gabe Charles going to set this up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to council as well. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to be in front of you today. We are excited to talk to you about the design for Midtown. This workshop is the second in a series that we've had. The first one that we had last month, which was on the transportation component of Midtown. We have another one coming up next Monday for residents, which will be a public information session as well. The goals of these workshops is really to provide some information to council and get your feedback on it, to solicit some questions and identify if we're going in the right direction as it relates to the Midtown and the OPA that we're working through currently. When we speak about urban design, it can be a little bit nebulous, I think, for some in terms of really understanding what it is. What does the term mean? What is it? What does it do? Perhaps to give it a little bit of context, I can say that when we talk about things like buildings, when we talk about how a building functions, how you enter into a building, the windows, the materiality, we're talking about architecture. When we talk about our streetscapes, our public spaces, our open spaces, plazas, et cetera, we're talking about landscape architecture. When we get into things like density, provincial policy, and deciphering that, population forecasting, zoning development review, we're talking about land use planning. And if we're thinking about things like our cycle lanes, our pedestrian sheds, integrating transit, we're talking about transportation engineering. So what then is urban design? It really is how we unify all of those different disciplines collaboratively to physically shape the places that we enjoy, the places that we're in. It's about not just the buildings, but the spaces in between them and how people use that space, how they interact with it, how they move to the space and through the space. So it's about shaping that space for people. And from a city building perspective, urban design weaves its way through the entirety of that process, from bringing those disciplines and other professionals as well to look at how you conceive of a vision for a place, whether it's a new growth area, secondary plan area. How do we then work that particular entity through to a development? And urban design, it touches all of the pieces along there through to the very end, where we're looking at how did we achieve what we had envisioned right from the beginning? Or are we getting what we want in terms of delivering new places? So as it relates to Midtown, we have a huge potential with Midtown. Our future, we know, is shaped through our urban structure. And a key component of that urban structure is Midtown. It's one of our centers, along with our corridors as well, which are those areas where we will be intensifying over the coming years. And our urban structure is important too, because it's not just where we're bringing growth, but also how are we preserving our natural and our cultural heritage. With Midtown, we know that we are mandated to plan for a minimum of 200 people and jobs per hectare. So at just over 100 hectares, we know that we're looking at just over 20,000 people and jobs for Midtown. How we deliver a new urban community into the center of Oakville is going to be integral to its success. And that really comes down to how we're going to be designing Midtown. We want it to be that dynamic place where people can live, where they can work, where they can visit, enjoy the space of being in Midtown, something which is different from the balance of the town. So I will turn it over to Christina to talk to us about Midtown and the design function for that. There's a lot of images throughout this, and so it's not to say this is what we're planning specifically, but to whet your appetite, give you some appreciation for where it is that we want to go. And I do want to thank Christina and her team for the amount of effort and hours that they put into this presentation. So I will turn that over now to Christina.
Good afternoon. Thank you for accommodating us this afternoon for the workshop. So if you were to ask someone what's in Oakville, they would easily respond with, it's the downtown and the main streets, it's the waterfront, harbors, and creeks, it's the award-winning institutions, the network of parks, trails, and open spaces, and it's the mature neighborhoods and the new emerging communities. And there's no end to this list. These are the places, the landmarks, amenities, activities, and experiences that define our community. And it goes without saying that there is a strong pride in place. Many of these diverse community assets are located close to Midtown. And it is through visioning, planning, and designing Midtown we are poised to build upon and add new assets to this impressive portfolio. Interestingly, when I ask about Midtown, I will get, where is that? Then I reference the GO Station, the Via Rail, and Oakville Transit Hub, and I hear, oh yes, Midtown will be unlike what we see on our current townscape. This is the natural evolution of our town as we accommodate the anticipated growth while maintaining the character of our mature and existing neighborhoods. Midtown will be distinct, a destination and a hub that will provide people here and those coming to Oakville with new opportunities to live, work, shop, and play. This is a new place, offering a more urban lifestyle, and we have the opportunity to strategically shape and to creatively design it from the ground up. In terms of strategically shaping, within our Livable Oakville plan, there are urban design policies in Section 6 that set clear parameters and provide design direction for how the overall Oakville community will take shape, as well as transform over time. Those urban design policies are further elaborated upon and implemented through the Livable by Design Manual, endorsed by Council in 2014. This document is used as an evaluation tool for development applications and capital projects to ensure that community and council expectations are met. The foundation for the design direction and the evaluation are 6 guiding principles, seeking to achieve a sense of identity in terms of creating distinct and vibrant places, compatibility, meaning being of Oakville and responding to the unique context, connectivity, maintaining and enhancing linkages, sustainability, lightening our footprint and responding to the challenges, legacy, preserving and celebrating our local assets, and creativity, inspiring innovative solutions and creating vibrant places, which takes us back to sense of identity. Now to creatively design. Further, we also have a design document that is specific to Midtown called Designing Midtown, and it was endorsed by Council 8 years ago. Just as with the 5-year official plan policy review activities, we are also currently re-examining the design direction specific to Midtown to ensure that it aligns with fine-tuning the vision, updates that have occurred since the last review, such as modifications to the transportation network. We want to ensure that we're validating the direction and identifying any gaps and assisting in creating the process to realize that vision in terms of implementation. The Designing Midtown document is divided into 6 sections, and those are on the left margin. So urban structure and transportation, they have been presented through the previous workshops and statutory public meeting, but I will touch on them through the urban design lens in this presentation. I will spend most of my time on the aspects of public realm and built form, and touching a bit on gateways. And as for parking, the details will be explored through the parking strategy, but I'll highlight a few examples. In terms of setting the context, This is the Midtown growth area and its immediate surroundings. In this map, we're geographically linking the growth area to the local places, landmarks, and amenities that are so close by, such as the traditional commercial districts in the red to the south and west, and the shopping center to the immediate north, civic institutions such as Town Hall, the new community center, our Central Library and Performing Arts Center in blue, the Sheridan College campus in blue as well, and various public and private schools in purple, and surrounded by the mature neighborhoods. And that's just to identify a few. As part of this review process, we look at existing attributes and the potential places by mapping the structured layers. It's the foundation and the framework upon which Midtown will emerge. So in terms of the urban structure of Midtown, we zoom in and we're taking a look at the routes to identify opportunities and challenges. We're considering the grid system, connectivity, route realignments, access points to Midtown, as well as the nodes. And again, this is focusing on those routes and how the road network will create the blocks for future development. The map demonstrates Trafalgar Road in the pink as a mixed-use transit corridor and a north-south spine, Cross Avenue and its extension, the major east-west mixed-use corridor, and major pedestrian and circling routes along the primary corridors and local roadways that will provide connectivity within the growth area and to the surrounding community. The next layers are the places. So for example, in yellow, the linear urban commons, envisioned as a linear urban plaza on the south side of Cross Avenue to create a more generous and enhanced streetscape, and it's situated on both public and private lands. Identified locations for major urban squares in orange. Identified the existing parks and open spaces in green, and including the possibility of utilizing the hydro corridor abutting the rail corridor as an active transportation connector and limited surface parking in the green with the vertical gray lines. We anticipate that there will be additional spaces identified with the finalization of the Parks and Open Space Strategy undertaken by the Community Services Commission. And we've also identified gateways and edges in purple, and they are strategically located at the entry points into Midtown and along its edges. By marking these gateways and edges, this will occur through signature buildings of high architectural expression and whether they're experienced from a distance or up close. Marking these areas by public art or other landmark features. And certainly throughout Midtown, specific streetscape treatments that will link all of the areas together, similar to the recent, the works on Lakeshore Road through our downtown. And so placing all of these layers together, we have the urban structure for Midtown. Now, during the statutory public meeting and the transportation workshop, much of the information presented was in map and plan format. The road network, active transportation routes, land uses, it was a two-dimensional representation. While these maps clearly demonstrate the adjacencies, networks, and where the various elements fit, align, and work together, we also heard, what will this look like? How will pedestrians and cyclists get around, and how will it feel? What will the buildings look like, and how do they feel at street level? And what about the open spaces and places for people to gather? Ultimately, the question is, how will everything fit together, and what kind of place will be created? And it is my goal for the remainder of this presentation to show the possibilities through various images and photographs. So I'll be sharing urban design concepts through an assortment of images that demonstrate the possibilities and the potential. Some of the images are from right here in Oakville, from neighboring GTA municipalities, and others from successful and dynamic urban areas from a bit farther afield. As I present these images, I ask that you conjure in your mind's eye the great places you've experienced, those of which left a lasting impression, so that as we continue to shape the vision for Midtown, we create urban design policies that can deliver on those types of places and activities. We are creating a complete urban community focused on places for people. So urban design is both an art and science. It's truly a collaborative endeavor, and the stakeholders are many. The end result may be subtle, like, wasn't it always this way? Seamlessly integrated into its surroundings, or can create lasting and a memorable experience. This is good design. Urban design is directing and guiding decisions about the look and feel of a place. The form, such as the massing of a building or the shape of the spaces in between. The fit, what is a design solution that brings specific context, ensuring that it's enriching and enhancing? And the function, how well will it function or operate as designed, and how does it contribute to the larger mechanism of the district, community, or town? I guess the short answer is, urban design is about making great places, placemaking. We focus on the assets, it's fueled by inspiration and potential, and the goal is to create great public places. Urban design focuses on two fundamental ingredients of community building and the creation of places. First, the public realm, so it's the stage and the props. And secondly, built form, which frames the public realm and provides the backdrop. When it's done well, people will inhabit these spaces and be drawn for their daily activities and entertainment. It is in the public realm, that's the streets, the squares, parks, plazas, pathways, where community identity is most strongly expressed. These are places for people. I'm going to spend the next few slides on components of the public realm. And again, these images are for illustration purposes to show the potential and the possibility. So I'll start with streets, and streets are places. They're the connective tissue of Midtown, linking both the built form, the buildings, and open spaces. And they also connect us to the broader Oakville community. The design of streets depends both on the transportation needs, so the number of lanes, the widths of the lanes, the speeds, as well as the placemaking function, how they will look and feel, and what activities might they host. Streets in Midtown will accommodate all types of movement, walking, cycling, transit, driving. And it's key that they create pleasant pedestrian experiences, that they're comfortable, that they're easy to navigate, that they're predictable and accessible, that there's natural cues to help with wayfinding for orientation, and that there's plenty of amenities, whether it's plantings for shade, seating, interesting things to do and see. Again, everything at the human scale. All of these contribute to the urban image and create that continuous experience as we go from place to place. I'll highlight two corridors. So the first is Trafalgar Road, the north-south spine, and it's a mixed-use transit corridor. And its function is to provide that transportation, so coming in, going through, and hopefully staying within Midtown. So while there are high-level transportation needs, there's still opportunities for placemaking. And it's still a pedestrian space, and the design has to provide for convenient and safe crossings at the intersections. It should be highly visible, and the streetscape should have a unique treatment. And again, along Trafalgar Road, we expect that there will be activities at ground level, even though it seems now it's just a way to get from A to B. Through the design exercise for Midtown, it will be a place. The second is the east-west pedestrian spine of Cross Avenue as a mixed-use main street, and it connects Lyons, Trafalgar, and the Chartwell districts. This pedestrian spine will be characterized by broad boulevards and active uses at the ground level. In terms of streetscape, there's opportunities there to gather and to pause, and it has the opportunity to become a destination, a place to people watch. Unique to Cross Avenue is an urban commons located on the south side of Cross within the Lyons District. It's a combination of boulevard and private lands, all deemed the public realm, offering a much more generous streetscape characterized by high-quality design, public art, and landscaping treatments, providing accessibility to all, easy to navigate, places for all ages in all seasons, and at the human scale. Moving on to streetscapes, again, creating places for people, they are the unifying element. And again, think about the recent streetscape enhancements in downtown. It really ties everything together along Lakeshore Road. Streetscapes are that interface between the public realm and built form, between public and private, and the design will be based on the road classification. But there will definitely be certain common elements or consistency throughout in terms of the sidewalks and the hardscape treatments, landscaping, tree plantings, lighting, furnishings that offer convenience, whether it's seating, bicycle storage receptacles, public art in strategic locations, and wayfinding, all critical to placemaking. And of course, in these spaces, we encourage activities in the buildings to spill out. The next level are the forecourts. And so this is characterized by additional space in front of buildings and becomes an extension of the public realm. And oftentimes it's achieved through strategic setbacks of the building, whether that's at the entrance or at other locations along the street. And it really becomes that transition between public and private. They can become meeting spaces, places to pause. And for the buildings, it's all about the curb appeal. Next are pocket courts within the public realm. And these are strategic and creative uses of the spaces in between. They are often smaller spaces, and they are interconnected to the larger public access and the pedestrian network. And they can be in public or private ownership. And I find that in my travels, when I discover these, they are often the most memorable experiences, and they're my little finds or, off the beaten track. And from urban design, we say, leave no space unanimated. So these are the little gems. Next are the courtyards. And these are the amenity spaces that are contained within the center of the block, oftentimes for the building inhabitants in and around, and oftentimes they're passive spaces. They can be large or small, depending on the spaces or the buildings that define them. And while they're mostly private, they also may have public access through, especially when these spaces are connected to the larger pedestrian network. And there's hardscape, softscape, mostly passive, but there could also be other amenities in those spaces. Moving up in the hierarchy, then there's the urban squares. And these are highly visible and highly accessible. They are typically designed and programmed for all seasons, all users, and have flexibility to support a variety of outdoor activities and events. They will have passive and active spaces, so energized spaces as well as places just to reflect and pause. They can be large or small, and it's really to suit the intended use and shaped by the surrounding uses in buildings. Hardscapes, softscape areas, and they're also part of the interconnected network. They may be public space or public-private spaces such as POPs, which are privately owned public spaces. And then what connects all of these public realm and open spaces are the pedestrian routes and the pedestrian ways. And like streetscape, they are the informal connective tissue throughout Midtown. They offer safe and convenient access to places within the district. They're comfortable, they should be predictable, they're accessible, and they follow desirable routes. They may be mid-block connections over the existing street. They may be through-block connections, so through the courtyards, as I had shown. They connect to and integrate with natural and open space areas, and they extend the connectivity between Midtown and to the locations outside of the district. Oftentimes, they'll offer alternatives to the road network, and they follow desire lines as people travel through and often can give a sense of discovery. Connected to those routes are the underpasses and overpasses, again, building connections to Midtown and beyond, and they're necessary. They need to also be predictable as they provide that continuity of the path. They're safe and comfortable. They provide places for people of all users and all abilities, and they should be part of the journey. So it's really that experience. And it's a part of the wayfinding system that can be integrated into Midtown as well. Moving on to built form. So those are the buildings and structures that frame and enclose the public space to give it shape and to give it identity. In our livable Oakville in the Livable by Design manual, we state that in Oakville, we are committed to achieving a high standard of urban design and architectural quality to provide an innovative and diverse urban form that promotes a sustainable, dynamic, and livable environment. In our estimation, successful tall and mid-rise buildings are architecturally interesting and create a cohesive design, composition through their proportions, scale, massing, building materials, architectural character, and connections to the public realm. And these building forms typically feature a defined base that can emphasize human scale and create a pedestrianized environment, a middle section or tower, and a top section that creates an interesting skyline. We focus on the facade articulation to ensure that it is visually interesting, making sure that there's eyes on the street, the interface with the public realm, and the relationship with other buildings. Most critical is where and how the building meets the ground. It becomes the backdrop to life on the street with activities spilling out, and it's so critical for us to get the at-grade condition right. The size, the character of the space, and the active abutting uses, and that creates that energy. The next several slides, I'll be showing built form by districts as organized in Midtown. So starting off with the Lyons District, it's a mixed-use urban core, and the policies have a very strong urban focus. We are anticipating tall buildings within the height range of 8 to 20 stories. Not all will be the same height because we want to ensure that there's an interesting and varied skyline. Taller buildings require slender towers, so limiting the size of the floor plate to mitigate the potential impacts of shadows cast on the public realm, to ensure that there's access to sunlight, and mitigate other microclimatic conditions. And the public realm will also be benefited by specific tower spacing to allow for light access and privacy. We are expecting green roof treatments and green building standards or guidelines to be applied. And I just wanted to point out that the image in the third column from the left at the top is an example of an above-grade structured parking with a retail liner at grade and a residential liner above. And that's actually a public parking structure in downtown Toronto. So as I mentioned, I would touch on some of the parking aspects. So that's the built form from a distance and from at grade, but also within the Lyons District as the mixed-use urban core. These images demonstrate how the building meets the street, the interface between public space and private development. And it has to be seamless, and it must read as a single public realm. The experience at ground level focuses on the activities and offerings rather than the podium and the towers above. We anticipate in this urban core that there's going to be a mix of uses: retail, commercial, office, residential, and it all must be pedestrian oriented. Moving on to the Trafalgar District. This also is a mixed-use urban core, and the focus is the transit corridor along Trafalgar. It will interface with the employment district along its eastern edge. And in this location, the building heights are 8 to 20 stories. And the same built form controls that I had mentioned in the Lyons District will also apply. Moving to the Chartwell District, the prestige office area with building heights of 6 to 12 stories. The office buildings with structured parking will come eventually to reflect the value of the land and shared facilities. It will be an urban area addressing the street, with the buildings located close to the street. Providing on-site and community amenity spaces for employees, open spaces for passive recreation and outdoor leisure, with nearby retail and restaurant offerings. It's important that this area is animated, that the activities and the offerings extend beyond 5 p.m. Moving to the Station District, the station itself will be developed via partnerships, and it certainly will signify a gateway for those arriving into Oakville. There are opportunities for a transit plaza, a distinct place that will encourage outdoor gathering, and it has to be visually and physically connected to transit, giving that sense of arrival and surrounded by travel-related amenities. There's opportunities to enhance the bus bays in the station district. There's an opportunity as well to place some connectors and open space along the hydro corridor, and also the improvements to our underpasses. And really here the messaging is that there's great opportunities to design and deliver infrastructure as great places, and seeing them as part of the journey and the experience, and not just a way to get from A to B. And moving on to Cornwall District, so south of or sandwiched between the rail corridor and Cornwall Road. And this is really the transition district. And it's mostly bound by mature neighborhoods to the south and the natural areas of the 16-Mile Creek. There's the gateway into Midtown at Trafalgar with signature building, urban square, streetscape, and there's also the gateway at its eastern end with the existing commercial plaza, and at the western end with the residential Three Sisters there before the ravine. And so that's some examples of the built form that could be accommodated within the Cornwall District. So Oakville has the opportunity to create a new, complete mixed-use community at Midtown and achieve a standard of urban design, accessibility, and sustainability that can become a model for the town and for other communities. And so how will Midtown happen? The development must be incremental, delivering infrastructure, public spaces, buildings, and amenities. But we have to plan for it now to guide and protect for what is to come. We anticipate that there needs to be a degree of flexibility. However, we must hold fast to the overall vision, ensuring that the parts will ultimately create the whole that we've envisioned. And so how will the community development vision and urban design direction happen? We have to ensure that the vision and design direction are clearly incorporated into the official plan policies. To ensure that the update to the Designing Midtown Design Direction document accurately reflects the high-level development concepts and the details for the development and creation of the public realm, the built form, and the critical interface between the two, as well as ensuring that the implementing zoning regulations capture the clear direction of the policies and reflects the intentions of the urban design direction, and also integrating the various outcomes from master plans associated with transportation, parking, parks and open space, et cetera. And we anticipate as well, building upon the urban design direction, there will be additional design documents that will weave their way into and provide additional direction, whether that's streetscape strategy, green development standards, wayfinding, or a privately owned public space strategy. In terms of next steps, we will be hosting a virtual public information session on June 28th. There will be ongoing opportunities for consultation. We will be refining the policy direction and recommending a final amendment to the official plan to council in fall of this year. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take and respond to your questions.
Thank you very much for a delightful presentation. We have questions from Councillor Longo and Councillor Giddings and Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Christina, that was a great presentation. I had some kind of concepts as you were showing photos, which I thought were really reflective of what the art of the possible is. And a couple of things that I went to York University and trained under Michael Huff. I don't know if you know him, but he's a landscape architect / planner. And he did some really cool things with what's now called the Evergreen Brickworks, which was the Brickworks site. So some of the concepts that I think hopefully can be incorporated. are how to, bring safety, but then also being able to be accessible and protected. So one of the cool sessions we had with Michael or Professor Huff, he took us to Nathan Phillips Square, and it was in the middle of a protest where there was like this combative protest, and it was in the middle of winter. And what we felt, and he looked and he said to us, this is kind of wide open. It's a great space, but it's not protected. And people, will hang out here because it's open, but it's not really a protected space. So the concept of being able to, go into an area where it's safe, where it's protected, where you can integrate kind of nature, I saw waterfalls, trees, those types of things. So it's actually a really neat place to be. And then for Councillor Adams' purposes here, another kind of concept is Spark Street, where you actually have, it's a walking promenade. So you don't have cars buzzing around you. Yes, there's some intersections, but those are types of things that we can, if that's part of the concept, that would be great because people would want to be there. They'll want to bring their kids. They'll want to go out and sit there for lunch or, just kind of get away and listen to the birds and see the trees and hear the waterfalls, whatever. But so I really like the photos, and it sparked a whole bunch of, as I was learning from, Michael Huff, but then, Ian McHarg and all that kind of landscape architect, if you can bring those concepts in to make it really livable, walkable, and enjoyable, you'll actually get people to gather there. Because, I'm a long-time GO Train user, and that intersection of Trafalgar and I guess it's Cross, like, I don't want to walk across that because it's like, it's dangerous. But if you can kind of take some of those spaces and protect people and allow them to walk from area to area without having to worry about a bus or a car or whatever hitting you, I think it'll be a really good use of that space and a great opportunity for Midtown. Anyway, those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great presentation. Thank you very much. You talked about the blurring of public and private space between courtyards, plazas, squares. How do we decide upon the amount of space that's required? Most of us are used to the prescriptive Parks, Rec, Library master plan, where we look at the number of people and decide on the number of swing sets and soccer fields and facilities. So how do we, in a blended process like this, how do we make those decisions?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we are still waiting on the Parks and Open Space strategy for, I don't know if I should be looking up here on the screen here, the public open space strategy from Community Services. And so that will certainly inform the amount of open space or the amount of amenities that are required for the Midtown development. And so whether those are provided as through parkland dedication or, as I'd mentioned, privately owned, publicly accessible open spaces. And so there's those opportunities to create those spaces and to create the amount of open space that's required. But in terms of the how and the how much at this point in time, we don't have those answers.
I appreciate that. You mentioned the downtown area in terms of the wider sidewalks and so on. By looking at this in advance, we'll be able to account for the space that's required for outside restaurants and so on, so we don't have to take away parking spaces, for example, and having people sitting inside the traveled part of the roadway. This is all the items that you were talking about by the sounds of it?
That's correct. And in many instances in other or similar urban areas, there's the opportunity to, and I guess it goes back to that idea of blurring, that, so someone walking down the streetscape may experience it as a public space, but there's opportunities to have a true boulevard that's the jurisdiction of the municipality, as well as the private space that's owned, from the property line in, but how it's designed and delivered can actually look as one cohesive space. So those patios that you're referring to are on private property, but because of that blurring of the lines, that they do read as one contiguous space.
And on that same vein, if there are buildings there will be buildings adjacent to each other, we'd be able to request or direct that open spaces be combined or separated, depending on the space that's available and the needs for that, anticipated for that area?
That's correct.
All right, you talked about green building guidelines. And there was a reference in the report about the Ontario Building Code as well. If this is going to be visionary and something that we're going to be proud of and other municipalities are going to come to us for, are we anticipating a district energy type model or going above and beyond, whether it be requesting main floor bicycle repair areas like I see in a number of areas through Seattle? Are we the rooftop bumping spaces with beyond green, where it's actual entertainment space for residents, things along those lines?
Those will be contemplated through that. That would be a separate undertaking, but the vision will inform the direction that we take there. But that's a very detailed approach. As for district energy, I'm not sure if we've contemplated that. Yeah. So, yes, we're looking at opportunities for district energy.
All right, I
as
see
well.
a lineup of hands up on the screen, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you. Very good presentation. I'm very impressed on the physical attributes of Midtown. I have a couple of questions. One, I was heavily involved for many years in creative cities, and with respect to we're looking at physical attributes and so forth, and parks and so forth. What I'm really looking at is a people place. What would draw people into this area on the creative side? That's all. If you've noticed in some of the municipalities and cities in the United States where low-income areas have been revitalized by the creative segment of the city, where they've moved in and they got artists, they've got music, they got all these wonderful activities. I don't want to lose sight of that. If we're a complete community, let's look at how we can incorporate that in some shape or form within the built environment. The second thing is the boundary. If I look at the boundary at the first slide, it wraps itself around, we call it the Three Sisters. Is that three buildings? Is that what you're talking about? Okay. And you're talking about connectivity and so forth. We have a natural attribute right there with the Hogs Hollow and so forth. The connectivity between Kerr Street and the Midtown, right now, that connectivity is non-existent. It is not safe. It's designed for traffic and not for pedestrians. I think there was a gateway situated there, but if there's something we can do to extend that design to connect up the Kerr Street area right into Midtown, would be much appreciated. I know it's outside the boundary, but it would be a nice flow and connectivity for both communities. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Adams.
Thank you. There. Thanks very much. You had in one of your slides, and I've now forgotten which slide it is, pictures of things like bridge structures and as part of the public realm. And I wondered if you could speak about how we could incorporate better quality streetscapes within our bridge structures and our public realms going over the QEW, because we went through the renovation of Trafalgar Road's overpass, and despite it having a tiny bit of additional pedestrian space on the sidewalks, it remains a really unfriendly kind of environment. It's really utilitarian. It's all concrete. There's no architectural prettiness to it. And we've got a bunch of other bridge structures that we're intending to construct over the QEW in the upcoming couple of decades. How can we make sure that we don't end up with just more utilitarian concrete?
Mhm.
'Cause you showed, for example, some pedestrian structures that have, I'll say, pretty interesting architectural designs with them.
So the ones that I showed on the slide deck, they're architecturally interesting in terms of the pedestrian ways themselves or the pedestrian bridges. But we've been looking at examples from other municipalities. There was one on the slide from Burnaby, BC, that accommodated both pedestrian and cycle routes through the bridge, and as well as one from Calgary that has a cycle lane down through the center of it with pedestrian sidewalks or identified pedestrian areas through there. So we're really accommodating both modes of travel within that structure. And then those are the more common, but then there's others where it incorporates, doesn't have the enclosure, but incorporates tree plantings and greening and other types of public art. So I guess there the sky is the limit in terms of the design of those. But ultimately, it's ensuring that they're located in predictable, convenient areas, that access to and from them are convenient and get you to those to the next part of your route. So again, it's the intention is to make those connections, but the how in terms of the design is really open to our imaginations
All right, so how do
and
we?
wallet.
Yeah, okay, so it's going to cost us a little bit more. Maybe it's 5% more, maybe it's 10% more, but it's going to cost a little bit more. We have funding issues around how we collect money for these things, and to what extent are we allowed to just say, yeah, our bridges, they're all going to be 10% more expensive because we're going to cover them and we're going to do something that we haven't historically ever done. Do we get to do that through our development charges or not? And further, how do we incorporate the requirement to make those bridge structures prettier and more inviting? Because as they are right now, the structures that we've built, the Trafalgar Road, the Dorval locations, those structures are all really uninviting, and they tend to make people feel like they don't want to cross them by foot or by bike if they don't have to. People will shy away from it, and there's been a movement to try to make them safer for cyclists. That's been a big issue with the cycling community, is the safety of those crossing points. So how do we make that our policy, that those structures, when they're either rebuilt or redesigned or built for the first time, must incorporate those things? Because I think our environmental assessment work that we've done so far has not incorporated those things. So it's sort of an engineering construction question in part, but it's also a planning issue in terms of what planning documents do we have to change to make that happen.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I can answer in part, and perhaps I know this CAO Closey's on the line too, and she may want to chime in on some of the financing issues. So it's entirely within the purview of this council to make those types of design decisions. Of course, the trick of the matter might be how we pay for those. And certainly when you're looking at development charges, it's typically based on the service level. And if it's a standard that we haven't provided in the past, we may need to look at a different source of funding, being our regular capital improvement, tax-based, tax-supported capital planning. But in terms of the design, I think it's staff's intention as we bring forward the capital projects for Midtown that you'll see some of these design elements brought forward, and it will be up to this council to decide whether it's the priority for this area and to budget appropriately for those enhancements.
Counselor?
Sorry, yeah, that's obviously that's going to be the case. So I guess my one remaining question is there a planning guidance document that we have to change so that we get that, so that it becomes a priority, that it becomes part of the review process for the development charges? It becomes our standard?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be part of the next phases of our urban design plan. So we have the guidance documents that will fall out, the implementation, how we design how we implement the urban design guidelines. So one will have to deal with the capital projects, the road improvements, and so on. So it will be part of the evolution of the urban design guidelines that we're working on over the next number of years.
Okay, I look forward to that happening.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Hazard-Thiel.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Christina, thank you so much to you and your team, because that was an uplifting presentation, and some of my council colleagues will be happy to know that the 5 pages of questions I have are now reduced. They're all just about fell off their chairs. So, okay, so here are my questions. So you talked about the importance of integrating and fit and form and function, and I could not do justice to how well you described that for us. What I'd like to understand is, before we get to a decision on the proposed changes to the OPA, do you anticipate we will have clarity on either the Parks Rec Master Plan or the Open Parks Strategy, and the revisions to the design guidelines? Because as I said previously, and I think your presentation today made quite clear, the devil will be in those regulations and details. So will we have that insight and time to absorb it? Because we don't live this every day, and hats off to you, because you have a wonderful job to be able to do that. Will we have that in advance?
Through you, Mayor Burton. Certainly the Designing Midtown document, we've got a solid start in terms of the document that was prepared 8 years ago, which aligns with the former vision for Midtown. And now that we're revising that, our intention is to concurrently make updates, validate the information that's in there, identify the gaps, and to really align it with the policy direction that'll be coming forward in the fall. So our intention is to deliver that design document at the same time as the official plan amendment, so that they will come together hand in hand. As for the park strategy, unfortunately, I don't know the timing on the delivery of that particular piece. I'm not sure if, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The planning and parks is currently working through the parks and open space strategy. Our intent is to get that wrapped up in the next few months. And it's important to get that done because we do need to be able to inform the Midtown policy, but also we know that we have to get into our Parks and Rec Master Plan into next year. So we do want to get that strategy wrapped up in the next few months, because it is going to be a foundational piece to the next things that we need to work on.
Okay, so thank you for that. You referenced, Christina, the prior plan and how all the hard work was done on that vision and those guidelines. And there's some striking differences between what's been proposed now and was proposed. And could you give me some clarity around townhouses and mid-rise? Because there's, in the design guidelines, it talks about townhomes as an opportunity, with obviously residential above it as well. But I'm not understanding, is that an element that will be encouraged in Midtown in the new OPA?
Through Mayor Burton, the built form itself will be evaluated. So again, that goes back to our next exercise of validating whether or not that's the direction that we can go based on the proposed revisions to the official plan. And so where there's townhouses, there may be opportunities in the Cornwall District to have maybe 3-story townhomes, 4-story townhomes, but we haven't gotten to that stage yet. We're still looking at that vision and validating.
Okay, so as Councillor Longo did, I'd just like to share that there's some great examples out there, and I'm sure you've seen them, where the base is a townhouse where there's it is actually part of a mid-rise. It's not a 3-stack, it's not a 4-stack, it's actually quite unique, and it creates opportunities for ground level livability. And it speaks to the broader issue, which is ensuring that Midtown is a community that welcomes and facilitates livability for families. We are all conscious of the fact that our community needs to have a mix of residential and use, and affordability is a much longer discussion. But this community, and I'm adamant that we will not talk about it as a growth node, because it is a community, it is a neighborhood we are building, needs to facilitate a mix of residential. And I would hope that we would find ways to look at the built form differently to achieve what we need to in terms of a target, but more importantly, to create that livability. So when I saw the change in the heights, I immediately had a visceral reaction to, well, how are we going to ensure safety, a sense of not mass, but enjoyability. If it's the slender towers with a podium, are we going to ensure that that podium is truly no more than 6 stories? Because you said at the human scale, it needs to interface with the public and create an experience that's not a throughway, but rather a home. Because we are creating homes. They may not be the homes that we live in or have experienced before, but it's the next generation's homes. And which leads me to the next part. Because of COVID, I'm a little concerned on June 28th, how many people will get out to participate. And having been a resident, not a town councillor back in 2014, the volume of participation from the public in terms of expressing what they want to have happen in Midtown. I would just hope if we don't see the kind of turnout on June 28th, is there some other level of engagement that will help finalize and help you with that finer grain and detail that you're working on the design guidelines?
Through Mayor Burton. We'll absolutely take the temperature or the pulse of the level of participation that we get on the 28th. And that will also be a virtual meeting similar to, I think, the workshop that we did on the hospital district, and with that opportunity to engage. And if we're finding that we're not getting the level of engagement that anticipated, I'm sure that we will offer up other opportunities to allow for an understanding of the materials that we're putting forward in terms of the vision and our intentions, as well as then to have those opportunities for feedback.
So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Christina, could you just highlight for us what is meant by a complete community? What do you see as the elements that will be incorporated to determine this is meeting that standard of a complete community?
So through you, Mayor Burton, the complete community, it's those opportunities to, as we all hear, it's live, work, play, recreate, be entertained. It's being able to access the majority of your daily needs within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, again, depending on what's being sought. we have, in the context map that I showed at the outset, that there's already fantastic amenities and institutions and places in and around Midtown. And so what, through this exercise in terms of getting the vision and getting the policies right, we're looking to create a bit of a different place. It is going to be different than what we see in Oakville today. It will be more of an urban lifestyle, but we're looking to add to that. So whether it's providing additional amenities or retail or restaurants. So again, it's finding the majority of those needs within a fairly close proximity.
So,
Councillor, I'd like to try to add a little element to that answer. For me, complete communities is a catchphrase now popular, and for several years now, popular in the planning profession. And it really arose in the reading that I've done to try to express the way planners wanted to move away from the way we used to separate everything with tight zoning. So you lived over here, is my hand showing? You lived way over here and you worked way over here. And you went shopping over here. And you went to play way over there. And the idea is to mix those closer together. It's not a formal legal term. It doesn't mean there's no checklist to it. It's a catchphrase. It's meant to inspire a new direction rather than to give you, it's not a collection of Lego blocks. I hope that helps.
okay, so thank you, Mayor Burton. So further to that, because I have done a little bit of reading as well, will we find ways, for example, to ensure and incent some level of daycare facilities and community services for that are standards that we know will be needed for livability. So
yes, we already achieved daycares, and it's achieved largely through the market mechanism, where when families move into an area, daycares sprout because they need them. And I could take you around and show you areas where that's happening. But generally, we provide for them, and we don't prohibit them, and they happen organically. Let me call it a function of demand.
So thank you, Mayor Burton. Christina, I'm sure you're familiar with Larry Beasley, who is a very successful gentleman and wrote the book Vancouverism, I believe. And he talks about the importance of regulation and codifying to ensure that these kinds of services and that the built form really supports the public interest. So the reason for my intent, and I know it just by how you did the presentation, it's your intent as well, is just to say, as you're looking at those design guidelines, as you're updating things, can we just reflect a bit on, there was a time when people thought of Midtown as the place where the 20-somethings might move into, and that, but it will eventually move on. There are elements now where this will be a community that has different needs, and how will that be articulated in the design? The update is all I'm asking is, maybe I'm too fixated on making sure that my future grandchildren will have a daycare close by, but I also don't know if I'm going to get grandchildren, so therefore I'm being visionary.
Councillor, your hypothetical grandchildren will have hypothetical daycare.
Thank you. My other questions are just around ensuring things like a canopy target, and because some of the photos that you showed, places that I've traveled, places that other councillors have traveled, I mean, we all gravitate to trees. It's why in Oakville we love our trees. Will there be canopy targets that are set, and where will that be delineated? Will it be in the design manual, or will it be through Parks and Recreation? Because that sometimes people reference that this will be different, and what I hope is that what we're going to establish is what won't be different. And what shouldn't be different is that people should have a sense of green and some peaceful places, not just hardscape places. And most of your pictures highlighted that. But if we don't have standards in the booklet, it will be difficult. So my last question is, how do you define, at least my last question for now, how do you define what shall be versus, at least I made you laugh today, Mayor Burton, at least what shall be versus what should be? Because when I was reading the OPA and some of it, I was getting a little nervous about how many were shoulds and not shalls. So as the professional planner, can you give us a sense of how you determine what would be a shall versus a should?
Certainly, through you, Mayor Burton. And that detail is in the official plan where we set the language, and we have very clear definitions in the official plan of what shall means. It's mandatory, it's a requirement. Should is, there's an expectation for it to deliver on that. So there is that differentiation between those two terms. And we certainly, again, through the official plan review, we'll be looking to those directives, whether it's a should or a shall. And I can't speak, specifically to certain ones, but if there are certain ones that are of concern, again, we'd have to look at whether or not we can require it or that it's part of the expectation. So I don't know if that has helped, but that language will be contained within the official plan. And then any design direction that we have created. So for example, within the Livable by Design manual, we've been very clear with our language to make it more directive. Say, design streetscapes with the following attributes, or design such and such. So there's no should, shall in there, because again, we need a degree of flexibility, because each site or each stretch of roadway is going to offer its opportunities and challenges. So the strength of the language will come from the official plan. And then that will trickle down then into how we explore that and implement that through the zoning and the urban design direction.
Ms. Tizard, you came very close to a crucial point that I hope you can amplify for the public and all of council. And maybe you could enlarge the continuum to include may, because there's a may, should, shall kind of continuum, and there's and the piece you briefly touched on that I think you might expand helpfully for everyone is we don't always have the power to say shall. And so when we want things that we don't have the power to say shall, we resort to these other words of encouragement.
Correct. And so when we get into the shall, it's things that the municipality, through the Planning Act and other mechanisms that we can require. The should, from my perspective, the should, both in terms of the official plan and as well from the design direction, is that it's clarifying and signifying what is important to our community. And so we have expectations, and when there's the should there, that we're I think being very clear as to what the expectation is, and that should be delivered upon. But we're not always able to get that. And the may is more of a permissive. So it's again offering that degree of flexibility. So I hope that.
I'll stop there for now. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer. Councillor Palmer, you may have taken your hand down, in which case I apologize for calling on you. Councillor Robertson.
Hi, Christina. Thank you so much for that. It's really humbling to be part of a planning piece that will go so far into the future and try to see the things that you want to see 30, 40, 50 years from now. A couple things that came to mind with me is kind of going to what Councillor Giddings was talking about in terms of our vision in terms of green, everything green, as much green, permeable surfaces for streetscapes, kind of seeing ahead to where things will be in terms of our own decorative planning, in terms of our landscaping, if weather and climate changes and it dictates that trees that we use now are not going to withstand heat and drought in 40 years, what do we do and how do we do with that? So I think that vision about how green we can make this is very important. And the second thing was more question oriented. Are there spaces, I know it's an urban design with an complete urban kind of feel. Are there places we know will be set aside that are big enough for things like a skating rink or a splash pad? Because I look at things like that and I think when you get into, this is a big community. This is a lot of people. And as much as everybody's, you know, in Ward 3 or Ward 2 or Ward 1 will say, yes, come to our things. You're asking, you know, people in this complete community to overwhelm what currently exists. So are we automatically thinking that, yes, they should have their own space for a skating rink, they should have their own space for a splash pad, or a vice versa space? So can you tell me if those things are in the planning pieces of it?
Yeah, through Mayor Burton. In terms of providing specific facilities, that would be through the parks, you know, strategy or master plan. But certainly we've seen, and you know, as we've been modeling and you know, bringing together the images to share with you today, you know, looking at other municipalities where these, you know, great urban centers that have delivered on these kinds of spaces and these kinds of experiences. And what we see is the opportunity to have that flexibility in some of those open spaces. So skating rink, you know, flooding it in the wintertime for skating rink, in the summertime splash pad. So really looking at how can we really multi-purpose those spaces to allow for a whole host of different opportunities. And so whether it's, you know, day into night, summer into winter, you know, those are all the considerations that we would have, because we know that those make great spaces. And whether it's something that's unique to Midtown and that will draw in other people from, you know, other residents throughout Oakville, because it's an event, it's a destination, or it's a, you know, a celebration of some sort, we want to be able to offer those types of spaces as well, but making sure that there's that flexibility there. But in terms of specific, okay.
And Ms. Tizard, you might also want to remind council about the town council has standards for all of these things. And when we revise or update our master plans, we usually do so with an eye on what the standard says we should have by way of, you know, how many people per thing. And so it's sort of implied, because we already have the math sitting in these major council policy documents. I'm starting to feel like we should circulate the whole encyclopedia when we do these things.
Okay, I'll go back to my other part. Do you work specifically then with setting up a meeting with like the Energy Task Force or things like that in creating your urban design piece of it?
Through Mayor Burton, yes. You know, we're the urban design team. We interface with a lot of our colleagues within planning. So, you know, while this is a policy project, there's urban design implications. So, you know, we're coming in as the urban design team to, you know, to add another lens. We've been involved with some discussions with energy, with urban forestry, with streetscape designs, of environmental assessments. So, you know, we do have a seat at each of those tables for each of those different types of projects. And so, you know, reminding of, well, we have to think about this, or how are we going to incorporate, you know, plantings along a street when we're doing an EA. So we do have the seat at the table, and I think most times our voices are heard. But again, it's adding the how might we or what if. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I'm done. Thank you.
That was a good question and a good answer. Thank you both very much. Councilor Lischina? All
Some of my
right.
questions have been answered already. Thank you.
Okay, well, that happens. Councillor Grant, then.
Thank you. And I'm realizing that a lot of what we're discussing several decades down the road, one thing that has stuck with me is when Councillor Adams brought up earlier about gateways to the area, keeping things interesting architecturally. There is that path that we're hoping to get built in the next couple of years over the QEW, from behind where Oakville Place is and over to the pad near where the current Holiday Inn is. The thing is that with current budgets and the way they are, the way planning is, that is going to be one of the first projects that we do really that's going to be leading this area. And we need to get that right. We need to make sure it's, you know, as Councillor Adams put it, you know, very interesting architecturally. I'm wondering, even though we are planning far out, is anything we're doing right now helping us to at least prepare or plan for making sure that the projects that we're doing currently will still maintain that interest or not force us to have to go back and redo an entire landing pad or entire bridge over the QEW in the future? Is there, what are we doing now to ensure that the current projects that will lead into this area at least still maintain that interest and don't look like something down the road when we go back? What was kind of ugly, but that was one of our first attempts.
Through you, Mayor Burton, in the current designing Midtown document, there isn't a strong design direction specific to the pedestrian overpasses or the underpasses. Our intent is through this exercise, or this assignment, to be able to strengthen that language, to be able to put the images that were shared today to be incorporated into that document, so it's very clear what the expectations are. When it comes to delivering upon that, sort of the design and the execution, it really depends on the partnership that's bringing that forward. And as I'd mentioned I think in an earlier question, it's having a seat at the table so that, you know, we're ensuring that, you know, from an engineering perspective, it's checking all the boxes, but we want to ensure that it is something that it truly is that gateway or a spectacle in a good way. Yeah, I'm not sure that that I can speak to the specifics on that.
Okay.
Sorry.
I guess my usual rounding around question before I actually get to the question, what I'm trying to point out is the concern I have is that we're going to have this beautiful Midtown and somebody's going to say, oh, did you take that awful caged bridge to get here over the QEW?
Let me take a first stab at that. Councillor, you are a veteran councillor, and I believe that when I tell you this, it will resonate with you. The iron rule in municipal politics in Ontario is the council that builds it gets to design it. Does that help?
It helps, as long as we keep that in mind as we're going forward and we don't start looking at budgets and thinking like, well, we can go a little cheap this time around. My only concern. Thank you very much.
Well, stay on council and make sure that we get the right bridge. Councillor Knoll?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just want to say, as I begin my questioning, is if there's anything that you've already covered, I apologize. I've had really bad internet, and in fact, I shut off my video for the first half. If it's been covered, just say covered earlier, and I'll watch it in replay. I won't ask you to repeat it again. So my first point actually follows up on both something that Councillor Grant touched on, as well as Councillor Adams. Councillor Adams talked about the aesthetics of some of these overpasses. And one of the things that, since you're talking about language and establishing some of those, that early kind of call to the future of design, I'm hoping we can include language like accessible and safe when it comes to overpass crossings. It's not just the aesthetics, it's the safety, and that includes things like the width, the ability to be able to get up to those crossings and to be able to maneuver them no matter what your level of ability is. And from the perspective of safety, I know that, for example, in Ward 5, over to visit our friends in Ward 3, we have this crossing, which is as my residents or as our residents would say, is not very safe. It goes underneath the QEW, and it's a scary crossing to say the least. But I'm hoping that some of that language can be front and center, so that when we get to that point eventually in the future, that safety as well as accessibility, not just code accessibility, but actual accessibility is taken into account. So that's a point I had. Sorry,
Councillor, I have to quote President Obama. It's just too good a chance I can't pass it up. We didn't build that underpass that you're talking about.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
I agree. And we keep trying to, actually, we've tried to fix it a few times. And while it's gotten a little bit better, it's still, it's really hard to put lipstick on that pig, that's for sure.
I think that's what you call a kid-built thing, right?
Kid built?
I think kids
Oh,
built.
Kit? No, maybe, who knows? Moving on, and this is where in case it was covered, I apologize. Has there been any consideration given to affordable housing in the Midtown core, how we would approach that going forward? That certainly is becoming more and more and even more relevant as our cost of housing goes atmospheric or stratospheric in our community. Have we given that any thoughts in terms of language around that?
Let me take the first stab at that. Oakville is working at the region to make sure that the permission for inclusionary zoning starts there and allows us to put it into ROP, and around an MTSA and a growth center, we're limited to where we can use inclusionary zoning. So once we do that, you've got your key to the lock for affordable housing. And for the benefit of people who don't know what inclusionary zoning is, it's basically a power to say X% of the units to be built shall be affordable. And, and you get to define it. So I hope that's not too much of an oversimplification.
Well, I understand inclusionary zoning, and I understand the work that we're doing at the region, and I do appreciate yours and other advocacy that has occurred over these many years for that important tool. I just want to make sure that that when we're specifically dealing with this in this early stages, we're talking about crafting language, and we're talking about crafting some of that early I guess, buy-in documentation for the community as well as the landowners, that we do start talking about that now, even though the framework may not necessarily be 100%. That was my only point there, but I do appreciate your comment, Mayor Burton. I think, we're all very enthusiastic about that as being one of the tools in our toolkit for affordable housing.
And not just there, like at all all of our MTSA growth center opportunities.
We need to make that a template question on everything and how we're going to apply that. Absolutely. So I guess turning that into a question, is this something that we have already contemplated? I understand we're contemplating at the regional level. Are we specifically applying this lens to this particular project at this point?
Through you, Mayor Burton, in terms of affordable housing, those would be, or the direction there would be within the official plan. When it comes to urban design, we just want to ensure that we have buildings that are appropriate for the context, and we're not as concerned with the tenure or who's living within the building. We want to create great spaces for everyone,
right?
And so that's our goal.
I guess just not to push back, I guess the only thing is that sometimes when you build monumental buildings or you're creating urban design around buildings that are palaces, you're not really taking into consideration what those might turn out to be in terms of affordable builds in order to achieve affordable housing. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. I don't need to debate any further. I got my point across there. I'm hoping that that's at least on the list of questions to be considered in the future.
But the good news is, it is one of those already covered or being covered and at a higher level so that we can do it in all appropriate places.
Good. This one is a process question. Like Councillor Grant, I'm an old hand at council as well, and have been through a couple iterations of, I didn't say I was old, I've said I'm an old hand, a couple iterations of Midtown core planning. And I think the first time we rolled this out, quite a few years ago, one of the first reactions was from some of the surrounding landholders saying, "What are you talking about? Where did this even come from?" What has and I'm sure that we're not making that mistake again. Are we including the existing landholders in these conversations early in the process so that there's no surprises? So when somebody's watching this in playback, somebody that's sitting on a piece of land with some thought in the future isn't saying, "I had no idea." I'm assuming that from a statutory perspective, we've covered it, but have we covered it from a practical perspective too, and maybe had direct conversations with some of those key landholders in that area?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we've had, on the heels of the statutory public meeting back in March, various landowners have reached out to our policy team, and we've had a variety of different meetings scheduled over that time period to inquire about the direction, to ask specific questions that are context specific or land specific to their land holdings. Urban Design have been involved, or staff from Urban Design have been involved in each of those meetings. And so some of the questions have come through from asking about, well, what does the gateway mean as it relates to my particular location? And so we've had very fulsome conversations. We've had follow-up. We also have, through our development, our planning development process, we've had some applicants coming forward through pre-consultation with some of their concepts and what they would like to move forward with. And so we've had very open conversations with them within the context of this current official plan review, and as well through the lens of urban design, and through the lens of what I shared with council today in terms of those kinds of expectations. So it's very transparent and very consultative.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much for that. Last thing is really easy, and if somebody hasn't already requested this, I hope you can share your PowerPoint presentation. I don't see it in my on eScribe, so I'd love to be able to have a chance to review that in more detail later. And the very last thing is just a huge thank you to you and to the team for this presentation, for the work to date. This is, as I think somebody said, is very inspirational to be involved in planning for decades in the future. I agree. Having been here 2 decades now, it's been fun to watch the community evolve in that period of time, and I can't wait to see how particularly Midtown Core evolves in the next couple decades. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councillor. The PowerPoints are on their way.
Thank you.
Councillor Palmer, I see a hand.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to staff for that presentation. I apologize for any interruptions. We did have a visitor. My son was here at our workshop today as well, popping his head in. So I apologize as well if I'm asking a question for the second time. My questions are on the commercial space square footage. So I'm just trying to understand what tools we have to ensure that we have sufficient commercial space. And my question stems from a lot of the buildings I see coming up in North Oakville, and the commercial spaces are not very large. So often it's difficult, for example, for a restaurant to operate out of those spots. We do have a variety of unique shops, but my conversations that I've had with planning as well, things like requesting a daycare is really within our conversations with the developer. And I'm wondering, do we have any tools where we can mandate those types of things?
Through you, Mayor Burton, in terms of the size or the overall commercial space required for Midtown, as well as the minimum size of some of those spaces, that will be discussed further through the official plan review. So from an urban design perspective, we're strongly encouraging, requiring, mandating that in order for these plazas and streetscapes and public realm spaces to be successful, we need to have active uses at grade. And so that's what we're advocating for, whether it's retail, whether it's restaurant, whether it's, services, daycares, community offerings, that those are that's what's going to make Midtown successful, and especially these open spaces. As for specific metrics or amounts, I don't have that response in this presentation, but that will be looked at through the official plan review, and I'll take that note back.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm happy to hear that. And then I guess just also more from my understanding, I don't really have clarity on I mean, the whole plan seems like it's going to be amazing if we get those setbacks. And so where is that implemented? Like, is that in our zoning? Is that also in the OPA? I'm just trying to understand a little bit more about where we can ensure that we're going to see those pictures, with like the same type of thing that we saw in the pictures shown to us today.
Through you, Mayor Burton, it's a combination. It would be through the official plan. It would be through the zoning in terms of minimum and maximum setbacks and requirements for step backs. If a facade is, or a building is quite long along a streetscape, so there'll be requirements through the OP. The zoning also will be directed through the design manual. And I think it was through this statutory public meeting, there was a discussion about the requirement for lands to create the road network, that there would be opportunities to go a bit taller. There may be some opportunities there as well to be able to acquire or encourage those publicly owned, sorry, I keep missing that, privately owned public spaces. And so being able to convey that those spaces really are part of that curb appeal, the welcome mat to each of those developments, and the benefit of having those spaces. So I think it'll be orchestrated through a variety of different tools to be able to get to that, the examples that I shared this afternoon.
Great, thanks so much for answering the questions.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Councillor Palmer. Councillor Haslett-Thiel?
Thank you, Mayor Burton. A couple follow-ups, if you will, Christina. In the guiding principles that are taken out of the livable Oakville design, the word livability is not one of those principles. It talks about sense of identity. It has all sorts of interesting elements that I would support, but the word livability is not one of the guiding principles. And I just wondered why that was.
Through you, Mayor Burton, when we prepared the document, it was on the heels of creating Livable Oakville, and it was our intent that livability is woven through all of those different principles. That with each of those, that livability is that core. So it was a while ago that we created, but that was the intent, that each of those would already touch upon that.
Okay, thank you for that. I would say that the image should be that livability is then at the heart of this large circle, because it does make you think differently about the design. My other follow-ups are just around, so the Metrolink service parking. And I understand, and people have referenced the decades it will take to evolve and build out Midtown. But it is not pedestrian friendly now. And if in the next 3 to 5 years we have buildings that are going up, what phasing would be put in place to create a safe pedestrian access to the bus terminal, to the GO station? I'm on record as saying it shouldn't be there. It should be moved, and they should know that. It was a wise decision before. They should come back to it. But if you stand at the intersections where you would potentially see some of these buildings get approval earlier than others, it is not walkable. It is very car centric. I'm not even sure if there's truly a proper pathway. So does that rest with a decision with Metrolinx, or what impact can the town have on short-term walkability as this project phases into place?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we have met with Metrolink several times about improving the surface parking areas with not much success. But in terms of the development, and if it's incremental, and we're actually doing this in other parts of the town, where if we know that there's, for example, in North Oakville, where we have the Trafalgar Urban Core or the Dundas Urban Core, where we know that there'll be development at some future date, we're ensuring that there's interim conditions or interim treatments that are put in place today. It may not be the final designed end result in terms of, you know, the streetscapes or the sidewalks or the connections, but making sure that in the interim, however long that may be, that those connections are being maintained. And so there's examples that I've seen in other municipalities where if it's like a construction site and the way they do the hoarding or the movement through it, that there's ways to make it still safe, predictable, visually interesting, even though there may not be something or may be a parking lot in behind there. So there's different ways to screen some of those activities. There's different ways to introduce interim connections that, but I think at the end of the day, it's ensuring that we've got a good partner with Metrolinx and that they're sharing our vision as well. And so I think that will come through further discussions with them. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It gives me some greater comfort that there's an alignment there of where we need to get to, which is great. I guess my last questions are around the bike, pedestrian, and Councillor Adams did a great job of talking about that challenge about getting over the bridge and about the aesthetics, but it's also, as I think Councillor Grant said, it's also about safety, etc. The connectivity from Trafalgar to Cornwall is still not resonating for me in what's proposed, and in particular, the other part that's not resonating is it still looks like the car is king when it comes to Cross and Trafalgar. And if we're ever going to get to a point where it's transit first, this phasing of this is so important. But, you know, speaking for folks that regularly contact Councillor Giddings and I saying, look, I can't get from Cornwall to Cross safely on a bike. The walking is not there. I just want to call out that anything that can be done in the work that's being done now straight to the fall really pauses and says, how do we fix some of that better than what's been shown to us at this point?
I think maybe if I could, I'd like to voice a thought about this. A heck of a lot of people walk that intersection every morning and every night between the GO station and the stable established neighborhood that's right there in the basically southeast area described by Trafalgar and Cornwall. So when we're declaring that it's not walkable at all, I hope it's heard as expressing a desire for a more walkable thing. But so many people are doing it that it's hard for me to, you know, given the basic meaning of words, I'm a little worried about over describing the situation. And as for the bikes over the bridge, I know a gentleman who used to ride his bike from his home near the town hall down to leave his kids at daycare across from the GO station. And then, I don't know what he did with his bike, but then he went into Toronto and worked at a bank and came home at night and reversed the course. And somehow or other, I'm pretty sure all three of his kids are still alive and hale and healthy. And he's sitting here among us, and you know, he's been in a car accident, but I don't remember any story about...
I might want a point of privilege there, Mayor Burton. I continue to ride my bike over the overpass on Trafalgar Road, but it could be a lot better is my point. And it could be a lot safer.
I'm happy to agree that it could be safer, but I despair when we call things that people are actually using impossible.
So I thank you for the correction, Mayor Burton. Yes, people do use it, and their request is that it needs improvement, and they have been raising that question for several years about needing more improvement. And we are at a point where the opportunity is in front of us, and I would not be doing my role as a councillor to not raise that improvement is necessary for connectivity, safety, and enjoyment. And that's why I raised it.
I'm glad you do. I remember standing on the Trafalgar Bridge with the then Minister of Transportation 15 years ago and asking her if she was widening the sidewalks as they rebuilt it. And she told me no. And I told her about the problem that during winter, pedestrians have to walk in the street because the snow's piled up on the sidewalks. And she called over Bruce McQuaig, then her deputy minister, later the head of Metrolinx, and told him to build us a pedestrian bridge. And he said, yes, ma'am. And she didn't say make it possible. She said, you build them a pedestrian bridge. And what happened was we were given the opportunity by the deputy minister for a brief moment in time to spend $1.5 million of our own money to put that pillar in the middle of the QEW to facilitate a bridge someday. And we even went and designed it. Many of you will remember the pleasure we had working with Dave Bloomer as our previous Phoebe Fu. And you know, he fell too, and we have a lovely design for that. And someday, when we get Midtown going, we have a place to build that. So we're a little bit further ahead, and the promise of the province was just a little bit less than what it sounded like. And but we've seen that story before too. So together we will climb this mountain, and together we'll continue to improve things. If we keep our eye on the prize, I think we'll get there. So I thank everybody for your contributions today, and I know that staff have benefited from them. And I hope that my effort to balance some of our rhetoric is viewed as an attempt to be helpful to everyone concerned. If there are no more questions, it would be in order to have a mover and seconder for the recommendation, which is that the information be received and the presentation as modified through the workshop be received. And Councillor Giddings and Councillor Chisholm, I thank you for that. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, that's carried. If we had a mover and seconder for the confirmatory bylaw, that would be terrific. Councillor Knoll, Councillor Adams. Well, you guys are quick today. Any objection? There's none, so that's carried too. Thank you, everybody. It's been terrific working with you. I've enjoyed hearing how your views have changed and which views have not, and I hope staff have taken note of the movement and also the things that are permanent, sounds like. And that ends the meeting. Thank you very much.